Welcome to the deep dive. We received a truly illuminating stack of sources this week. Three really comprehensive reports focusing on the core elements of long-term wellness. We're talking targeted nutrition, the delicate art of glucose stabilization, and the profound restorative science of sleep.
And the mission for this deep dive is really to synthesize how interconnected these three factors are. What these sources show so compellingly is that our bodies, and especially our brains, they're not just passively awaiting their destiny. Our daily, seemingly small choices literally define our cognitive fate.
Wow.
And this is where it gets really interesting. You have this core concept that your brain is what you eat, combined with the, frankly, alarming fact that the brain can't sound the alarm when its health is declining.
That's a powerful, and yeah, it's really a terrifying idea.
Yeah.
It sounds like we have a biological ticking clock running inside our most important organ, and we're just completely oblivious to the early warnings.
Precisely. We are oblivious, at least until the problems become really severe. And that's why so much of the foundational research we looked at is anchored in understanding Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And while that's a devastating condition, the behaviors and the dietary strategies that were discovered to help prevent it, well, they serve as a highly effective blueprint for optimizing broader cognitive health over a lifetime.
So if you protect yourself from the extreme, you're pretty much operating at peak general health.
That's the idea.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission is to move past the abstract and get into the concrete steps we can all take. We're talking, starting from our breakfast table all the way to our bedtime routine, all aimed at protecting our most protected, yet paradoxically most easily damaged organ, the brain. So let's start with that fundamental paradox. We think of the brain as the most protected organ, right? It's in the skull. It's buffered by meninges and cerebrospinal fluid. I mean, it sounds impenetrable. But the sources reveal the supreme irony when it comes to internal health.
They do. That physical protection, the skull, the fluid, that's all designed to shield it from external forces. Sudden head trauma, things like that. But when we talk about internal harm, the brain is the organ most easily damaged by a consistently poor diet.
And why is that?
It's simple, really.
Yeah.
It's constantly being rebuilt. All of its required structures, the specific proteins, the unique fatty acids, the vitamins, they have to be constantly replenished, and they can only come from the food we eat.
So if we're consistently supplying it with, poor or insufficient building materials, the structural damage is just inevitable, even if we feel fine physically.
Absolutely. And the relationship between general physical health and cognitive function, it's undeniable now. We know an unhealthy lifestyle can cause up to 90% of all cases of type 2 diabetes.
Right?
Now look at the cognitive side of that coin. Recent evidence suggests that just by addressing the known risk factors for heart disease and type 2 diabetes, we could prevent over a third of all Alzheimer's cases worldwide.
What hurts the heart hurts the head.
Exactly. What hurts the cardiovascular system hurts the hippocampus.
Which brings us directly to the specific nutrients the brain needs. The sources highlighted fats and proteins. Let's start with omega-3s. They're cited as the #1 nutrient in the fight against age-related cognitive decline. What's the evidence for that?
Oh, the data is incredibly strong. A landmark study showed that people who consume low quantities of omega-3s had a staggering 70% higher risk of developing Alzheimer's.
70%.
70. Conversely, those who regularly ate more than 2 grams a day,
Yeah.
mostly through fatty fish or supplements, were highly unlikely to develop dementia at all.
And can you actually see this effect, in the physical structure of the brain? Can we see the penalty for skipping these fats?
Yes, you can, and that's what's so powerful. MRI showed that low omega-3 intake, especially of a type called DHA, literally accelerates brain aging. Researchers measured accelerated brain shrinkage, specifically in the hippocampus, which is our memory center. That shrinkage was equivalent to 2 extra years of aging, just from a lack of the right fuel. It is a measurable structural penalty.
That puts a very concrete cost on poor dietary choices.
Okay, let's pivot to protein, which provides the amino acid backbone for our brain cells. We need to talk about tryptophan.
Tryptophan is critical because it's an essential amino acid, meaning your body cannot make it. You have to get it through your diet. It's the absolute essential impetus for serotonin production. Serotonin regulates mood, happiness, even digestion.
The insight I found most surprising here was just how inefficient its conversion is. You need a daily intake of about 5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, but our sources noted that less than 10% of that tryptophan is actually used to make serotonin.
And that's the key takeaway for diet planning. Because that conversion rate is so low, and
Right.
because we use serotonin for so many things every single day, you need regular, sustained daily intake of tryptophan-rich foods. If you skip it for a few days, your body can't just pull reserves from somewhere else. Those neurochemical production lines they slow down. It's a supply chain issue that demands daily replenishment.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've covered the structural building blocks, the fats, the proteins. Now let's turn to part two, the glucose-brain connection. If the brain runs on food, its main fuel source is glucose, and the kind we choose is, well, it's everything.
This is where we shift from building materials to managing the engine's performance. High blood sugar levels don't just put you on the road to diabetes, they actively and immediately damage the delicate brain structure. They increase inflammation and insulin resistance.
And the threshold is lower than we think, right?
It is. That's what's so fascinating. Our sources show that high blood sugar increased dementia risk even at glucose levels that are considered normal in standard tests.
Yeah.
So below 120 milligrams per deciliter.
So we might be walking around with normal blood sugar thinking we're fine, but our brains are already taking a hit.
Exactly. The refined white sugar we often consume overworks the pancreas, it leads to insulin resistance, and then glucose just builds up in the blood.
Right.
And people think of glucose as white bread and pasta, which are pretty poor sources.
Right.
The best natural sources, the ones that give you fiber and nutrients, are things you wouldn't even think of as sweet. Onions, turnips, rutabaga, red beets. A single small red beet alone contains 31% of the daily glucose requirement.
And stabilizing this glucose curve is vital for more than just cognitive health, right? Things like PCOS.
Oh, absolutely. Conditions like PCOS, which are often driven by excess insulin, see marked improvement when those levels are consistently stabilized.
So how do we get these spikes under control? Let's dive into the 4 glucose hacks. These are highly actionable, science-backed steps.
Yes, and we can implement them sequentially. One new change each week. The foundation, hack number 1, is adopting a savory breakfast. It has to be built around protein and fat, think Greek yogurt, eggs, nuts, and absolutely nothing sweet except maybe a few whole berries.
The visual data on this is just shocking. We saw a comparison where an omelet and avocado kept the glucose curve perfectly steady, just a flat line. But the popular choice, an apple, banana, and strawberry smoothie, created this massive rapid spike of plus 60 milligrams per deciliter.
And that surge is always followed by a crash. That
Yeah.
crash sets you up for fatigue and cravings for the rest of the day. It's what we want to avoid. So in week 2, we layer in hack number 2. Vinegar once a day.
Okay, vinegar.
Just consuming 1 tablespoon of vinegar, like apple cider or white vinegar, right before a sweet or starchy meal can dramatically reduce the glucose spike of that food.
But what is the vinegar actually doing on a cellular level to flatten that curve? Is it just slowing down digestion?
That's a great question. The acetic acid in the vinegar temporarily interferes with certain enzymes, amylase, that break down starch into glucose in your stomach.
Ah.
By slowing that process down, the glucose enters your bloodstream over a longer period, so you get a smaller, flattened peak instead of a massive surge.
So it's a mechanical delay.
It is. The image comparing a regular pasta carbonara spike versus vinegar plus pasta, it shows that delay perfectly.
That's a genuine deep dive into the why. Okay, moving on. Hack number 3, introduced in week 3, is the veggie starter.
This just means eating fiber-rich vegetables, about 30% of your meal, before you eat the main course. Fiber acts like a physical mesh in your stomach. It tangles up the food and physically slows down how quickly all that subsequent glucose is absorbed.
And the visual example here was fantastic. A massive spike from eating a sushi roll alone, unavoidable. But if you eat a bowl of edamame before the sushi roll, the spike is almost eliminated.
And it's not just about the numbers. Reducing that spike also drastically cuts down on the post-meal cravings that usually hit you an hour later.
Which is the immediate behavioral win. And finally, hack number 4 for week 4.
The 10-minute movement after a meal. This is the gentle giant of a habit. Moving after eating is most powerful for curbing spikes from high-starch or sugar meals because your muscles immediately start using that glucose for energy, pulling it out of your bloodstream. But honestly, it's a healthy habit after any meal.
Okay, so we've optimized the brain's building materials and we've managed the fuel flow. But all that dietary work can be completely undone if we ignore the third leg of this stool, which is the heroic persistence of sleep. Why, from an evolutionary perspective, has sleep persisted? I mean, despite the obvious hazards of being vulnerable and unable to gather food.
Well, the very persistence tells us everything we need to know. It means its internal restorative benefits must far, far outweigh the external hazards. Sleep isn't a luxury. It's a non-negotiable evolutionary requirement. The regulation of sleep itself comes down to a dual process. Process S, our sleep drive, and process C, the circadian rhythm.
And process S is driven by that accumulation of adenosine, the sleepiness chemical, which explains the famous caffeine crash rate.
Exactly. Caffeine is an ingenious molecule because it temporarily blocks the receptors where adenosine normally binds. It's like putting a barricade across a dam. But while that barricade is up, the pressure, the adenosine, is still building up behind it.
Right.
When your liver eventually dismantles that caffeine barricade, all that accumulated adenosine rushes in, hitting you with that sudden, intense, inevitable crash.
And meanwhile, process C, our internal 24-hour clock, is running the whole show.
Correct. That clock is controlled by the tiny suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN. It's a cluster of only 20,000 neurons deep in the brain. Think of it as the brain's tiny master clock. It relies on external cues like food timing, exercise, social interaction to reset its cycle.
Which is why modern life is such a disruptor.
It is. Evening blue LED light, especially from screens, is twice as harmful as warm yellow light at suppressing the nighttime release of melatonin. It basically sends a signal saying, wake up, it's midday, right when the brain is trying to prepare for rest.
So once we finally do get to sleep, the two types, deep NREM and REM, perform these different but equally critical functions for the brain. Let's start with deep NREM, or slow-wave sleep.
Deep NREM is the nighttime power cleanse. During this phase, the brain's electrical activity decelerates dramatically. We're talking 2 to 4 waves per second, which is about 10 times slower than when we're awake. And this electrical deceleration is actually what mechanically powers the brain's plumbing system, the glymphatic system.
So if the brain is slowing down electrically, that's like turning on the plumbing full blast. What is the glymphatic system actually doing?
It's the brain's dishwasher. It's incredible. During deep sleep, those slow waves pulse, and they literally increase the flow and expulsion of cerebral, spinal fluid, and metabolic contaminants by 10 to 20 times. This is the only time the brain can effectively clear out waste products, including the amyloid and tau proteins that are associated with cognitive decline.
So if you consistently skip deep NREM, you are essentially leaving the brain's garbage sitting there overnight.
That's a perfect analogy.
Oh,
You
wow.
are.
That makes the connection between sleep loss and cognitive disease just immediately tangible. And then we have REM sleep, or dreaming. What's its dual purpose?
REM sleep does two critical things. First, it promotes creativity. It actively collides newly learned memories with the entire back catalog of your life's experience. It's the period where the brain forges novel links, which is often why we wake up with solutions to problems we couldn't solve the day before.
And the second function is emotional health.
Absolutely vital. REM provides emotional recalibration. It lets the brain tune its emotional decoding networks. After high-quality REM sleep, we have superior emotional intelligence. We're better at understanding our social world. When we're sleep-deprived, that emotional navigation system loses its sensitivity. We become reactive and poor judges of social cues.
The cost of failing to prioritize this trifecta of health is it's shocking. Let's look at the consequences of sleep deprivation alone. Getting less than 6 hours of sleep can drop your time to physical exhaustion by 10 to 30%.
And the cognitive degradation is both rapid and cumulative. The sources cite that after just 4 hours of sleep for 6 nights in a row, your performance degrades to the level of someone who has pulled 2 back-to-back all-nighters. That's a 400% increase in concentration lapses and microsleeps. And we have to remember the societal risk. Drowsy driving accidents actually exceed those caused by alcohol.
And this feeds right back into the glucose problem we were talking about. On the metabolic side, short sleep compromises impulse control regions in the brain, which is why we get that increased hunger, appetite, and a specific lust for quick-fix sugars. It completely undermines our efforts at the breakfast table.
It's a vicious cycle. And for anyone in high-stakes professions, the data is sobering. Sleep-deprived medical residents make 460% more diagnostic mistakes in the ICU after a 30-hour shift. The lack of sleep doesn't just make them tired, it makes them demonstrably dangerous.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The sources make it undeniably clear that separating targeted nutrition, careful glucose stabilization, and deep restorative sleep is impossible. These factors don't just exist side by side, They reinforce each other, affecting our metabolism, our emotional regulation, and our long-term memory.
And knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied consistently. The key isn't the occasional perfect day, but the accumulation of small, consistent shifts. As the sources remind us, simple incremental changes, like choosing a savory breakfast over a sugary one, or taking a quick walk after dinner, or ensuring you turn off that blue light before bed, those are the foundation for reversing the trajectory of age-related decline.
We've seen that high-quality sleep restores the brain's learning capacity and helps cement new memories. We also know that just tracking our own data, physical activity, light exposure, food intake, significantly increases our long-term adherence to healthy habits.
So if simply seeing your fitness data makes you choose broccoli over a cookie, consider this provocative thought for your own journey. Imagine how using accurate, real-time tracking of your sleep stages and your glucose levels could provide you with a direct, personalized blueprint, not just for avoiding disease, but for maximizing your brain's performance and health. How would seeing the tangible data of your own cognitive improvement change your motivation to stick with these habits for life?